2021 Iowa State seems to be one of the biggest anomalies of the 2020s for multiple reasons. The obvious is where they started and where they ended. The Cyclones were ranked as the 7th best team in the preseason AP poll, yet weren't ranked for more than half of the season and finished 7-6. In hindsight, you can say Iowa State should have never been ranked this high. The Cyclones have only been ranked 3 times in the preseason AP poll prior, never ranking higher than 20th, and that was back in 1978. Actually, that preseason number 7 ranking is the best for Iowa State in any week in the AP poll. The recruiting rankings are much lower for the Cyclones than the rest of the top 10 too, making them even more of an outlier. On the other hand, I can argue it makes perfect sense why Iowa State belonged as the 7th best team in the country. The Cyclones returned 19 of 22 starters from the greatest team in Iowa State history in 2020, which went 9-3 against a schedule that featured 5 teams ranked in the postseason AP poll. Returning at quarterback was Brock Purdy, who came in with 33 starts under his belt, the best passing season in Iowa State history, and all Big 12 honors a season ago. Breece Hall was next to him at halfback, rushing for an FBS high 1,572 yards and adding 21 touchdowns while earning All-American honors and Heisman votes. Leading receiver Xavier Hutchinson, the Big 12 newcomer of the year after coming from the JUCO ranks, and tight end Charlie Kolar came back too. So was Will McDonald, the country's sack leader in 2020, and Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year Mike Rose. The Cyclones had loads of experienced talent, some of the best players in the Big 12, and nearly everybody I mentioned is still contributing on an NFL roster. I mean, Brock Purdy and Breece Hall are top 15 at their positions. Now, how did a team with all that talent and an extremely good coach like Matt Campbell, who by far has Iowa State in the best spot that program has ever been at, only go 7-6? There's a lot to unpack here. One of the main reasons I hear for Iowa State's 2021 regression is coaching, particularly with offensive coordinator Tom Manning and special teams coordinator... Well, actually, Iowa State didn't have a designated special teams coordinator. And when you go to week 2, you see how important special teams are. Iowa State was set to play Iowa, a team known for their special teams, in the 65th playing of the Cyhawk, and this was the biggest installment yet. This matchup was the first time both teams were ranked at the time of the game, and it was even a top 10 matchup. The Hawkeyes were number 10, and the Cyclones number 9. Iowa's special teams were led by the legendary punter Tory Taylor, who punted 8 times for an average of 51.1 yards, with 5 punts landing inside the 20-yard line, and 4 of those landing inside the 10. One of those punts set up another problem with this Iowa State team, and that is turnovers. They weren't always a problem. Iowa State had a pretty average 14 turnovers on the year, but in the 7 wins, the Cyclones had only 2 turnovers. That means in 6 losses, Iowa State had 12 turnovers, 2 a game. And that's how Iowa makes plays like this.
All of the college football coaches and how they'd shared that with their players. It's really moving. Ball is on the ground. A fumble, a scoop, and a score. It's another turnover, and Jack Campbell is in the end zone. An absolutely awful turn of events for the Cyclones.
In total, Iowa State had 4 turnovers, 3 being Brock Purdy interceptions, and he was benched for gambler Hunter Deckers. The Cyclones' 4 turnovers led to 20 Iowa points, and each scoring drive started in Iowa State territory. This was the quintessential Iowa football game. Who cares that Iowa State nearly doubled up Iowa in total yardage? The 27-17 Hawkeye win is all that matters. We see more of the special teams problems 2 weeks later when Iowa State traveled to Waco for a battle with the Baylor Bears. While the Bears were 3-0, they were very untested, with wins over Texas State, Texas Southern, and Kansas. The game was back and forth in the first half, and Baylor held a 21-16 lead in the third quarter after an Andrew Mevis field goal. Baylor would respond by Tristan Ebner racing 98 yards to the crib on the kick return. Ebner also returned a punt for 41 yards, punter Corey Dunn had a punt blocked, and Mevis missed a 47-yard field goal. In the end, Iowa State would score on a 16-yard Breece Hall touchdown with 24 seconds left, but the game-tying 2-point conversion failed, and Baylor won 31-29. Baylor gained 20 points from being better on special teams in a 2-point game, and now Iowa State was 2-2. A lot of the earlier excuses didn't apply to the following loss against West Virginia. Special teams were a non-factor, and Iowa State won the turnover battle 2-1, forcing a pick 6 too. What went wrong then? Iowa State fans would say the officials, and upon my review, they've got a good point. It doesn't look like Bryce Ford Wheaton got a foot down on this long touchdown pass.
Take it to the air again.
What
Bryce Ford Wheaton.
the way there.
Yeah, they're going to review this. But did he have control of the football?
And this fourth down touchdown to Winston Wright looks like it should have been a delay of game.
Wow, barely got that off.
Wide open.
Oh, wide open, Winston Wright!
The most contested play came shortly after, with Iowa State at the West Virginia 2-yard line, trailing by a touchdown. Breece Hall carried the ball and looked to get into the end zone, but the play was ruled a fumble. Honestly, I don't think anybody knows what happened here. There's no good view if Breece got in the end zone, was down at the 1, or fumbled. The officials didn't know either, with multiple guys signaling multiple different things, but when all was said and done, West Virginia got possession. Iowa State had a chance to tie the game, still trailing 38-31 with 3:42 left, but the Cyclones ran out of time and lost. Another problem today was with Iowa State's normally stout defense. Jared Doege was much maligned as West Virginia's quarterback in his 3 years with the program. I mean, look at this pick 6. But he was honestly great today. His 370 passing yards and 3 touchdowns were the most in his career as a Mountaineer, and he got 100-plus yard efforts from Bryce Ford-Wheaton and Winston Wright. He did throw a second interception, but that was on a tipped ball. Additionally, Letty Brown ran for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Doege didn't get sacked. The blame for this loss is split between the referees and defensive coordinator John Heacock. He was too conservative defensively, frequently sending only 3 pass rushers, and West Virginia responded by dicing up his defense to the tune of 492 total yards, one of 2 times the normally stout Cyclones defense allowed over 360 yards of offense. What was the other time allowing over 360 yards? Let's talk about that game now. Texas Tech put up 529 yards of offense on Iowa State in their Week 11 contest with the Cyclones, a game they won 41-38 off this ridiculous 62-yard kick by Jonathan Garibay.
Jonathan Garibay, the boot is away, and it's good! Walk-off win for the Red Raiders, 62 yards!
Any Red Raider fan in attendance or neutral fan watching at home got to enjoy a classic Big 12 shootout. Both Purdy and Texas Tech's Donovan Smith threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the game nearly saw a massive comeback for Iowa State. The Cyclones were trailing 28-7 in the second quarter and 31-14 late in the third quarter, but tied it up late on an Andrew Mevis field goal, and while Cyclone fans were expecting overtime and a chance to forget the slow start, they got a gut punch. John Heacock and the Cyclone defense simply weren't ready for dual threat Donovan Smith, making his first career start, and he diced up Iowa State all day. Blend that with Brock Purdy's 2 interceptions, the Clones dug themselves a hole they couldn't get out of. Iowa State made good adjustments and would have had momentum headed into overtime, but they didn't have that luxury. After getting diced up by a freshman, we should know what to expect against Caleb Williams, as the Cyclones traveled to Norman, seeking revenge for last year's Big 12 championship. However, Heacock's defense largely shut down Williams, who threw for only 87 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, although he ran for an extra 67 yards and a touchdown. On offense, the Cyclones had 3 turnovers, 1 being returned for a touchdown, were sacked 7 times, ran for only 51 yards, and even played without Brock Purdy for a little bit, as he got banged up. Yet, they could have won. Like all the other non-Iowa losses, Iowa State was trailing by a touchdown late in the fourth quarter and pushed their way to the Oklahoma 21-yard line. However, Purdy threw an interception, just like the 2020 Big 12 championship, and Iowa State dropped another heartbreaker. Turnovers were really bad for the Cyclones today, but the blame for me has to go to their root cause, the offensive line. The Iowa State offensive line were simply outmanned by Oklahoma, and there's only so much you can do as an offense when your quarterback is under constant duress and you can't run the ball to take the pressure off him. Good job, I guess, Alex Grinch. Glad you did something for once. That was Iowa State's last regular season defeat, and a 7-5 season was surprisingly good enough to make the Cheez-It Bowl to face 9-3 Clemson in Orlando. With Breece Hall opting out, the Cyclones had an uphill battle from the start, but kept the game close until one of the stupidest and most Brock Purdy plays ever happened.
Nearing 4 minutes to go in the third quarter. Purdy's pass batted in the air. Purdy bats it forward, and it's intercepted by Goodrich. Inside the 10, Goodrich into the end zone. Touchdown!
You know, I see why he was the last pick of the NFL draft. The Cyclones would make the game interesting again until they got in yet another 2-minute situation trailing by a touchdown.
Purdy to throw, pumps, steps up, takes off, gets the first down, and he fumbles the ball! He jumps on it.
And Brock Purdy struck again. I'm going to chalk that one up to no Breece Hall, a very good Clemson team, and a completely random pick six, but at the end of the day, they all count the same. So that's how Iowa State ended 2021 with a 7-6 record. 5 of the losses were in one-possession games, the other one was against Iowa, and that probably should have been a one-possession loss too. Want to know what my conclusion is? This team should have won 10 games. They weren't the 7th best team in the country good, but they should have been around that 9-3 or 10-2 mark and competed for a Big 12 championship. I also think Iowa State was slightly overrated because of 2020. They were a very good team, but they benefited more from continuity than most other teams. They played in all their games and didn't suffer COVID breakouts like some others. But while another similar season could have occurred in 2021, it just felt like there was one or two things in each loss that cost Iowa State some potential wins. Against Iowa, it was special teams and turnovers. Baylor was special teams. West Virginia was pass defense and referees. Texas Tech was pass defense and turnovers. Oklahoma was the offensive line, and Clemson was no Breece Hall and turnovers. Despite that, Iowa State still could have won or forced overtime in nearly every loss. Better offensive play calling would have made a difference, and so could an extra 10 yards some drives from the special teams. Or, the Cyclones could have finished some of those fourth quarter drives with a touchdown instead of a turnover. I think the saddest part of the story is we still saw flashes of what this team could be. Iowa State handed the Fiesta Bowl and nearly Big 12 champion Oklahoma State Cowboys one of their 2 losses all year. They blew out Texas 30-7, who had their worst offensive showing in a game since 2015. Statistically, Iowa State had a similar profile in 2021 to 2020. They had 1 fewer point per game and 10 fewer yards per game, but offset that with 1 fewer point per game allowed and 30 fewer yards per game allowed. Total turnovers, sacks, and penalties were roughly the same too. The big difference, though, was third downs, as Iowa State went from first in the Big 12 in 2020, converting about 45% of third downs, to 9th at only 36%. Defensively, that number dropped from allowing third down conversion 33% of the time to 38%. The pieces were there, and Iowa State looked like the same team and played the same way as the year prior. However, the results weren't there. Cyclone fans would end up spending their Saturday nights asking what if and just drinking away the pain. Instead of a legendary year, it was a painful one, and the most hyped season in Iowa State football history.